right, let's get to work on some summer paintings. Now, all of these are different prompts in my 30 summer painting prompts, but I thought I would take some of those prompts and actually put a tutorial to them for those of you who want that more step-by-step. So in this first video, we'll be doing a flamingo floaty, talk about how to make it shiny. In future videos, we'll be doing a sandcastle, some mushrooms, and a tent for camping. So for our floaty guy, our flamingo floaty, we're gonna start by getting the whole thing wet. Oh, actually, I'm jumping way ahead of myself. Before we do any of that, you'll notice I've already sketched out my flamingo. Now, if I paint right on top of my pencil, I'm likely to see the pencil through the paint. So if I'm gonna sketch anything at all, I like to then go over with pen, and then I can erase the pen, and then I can paint. I love having pen and paint in my watercolor masterpieces because I think it makes them feel just a bit more illustrative, and it kind of gives it this nice contrast that watercolor on its own is kind of hard to achieve that contrast. So I sketched out this flamingo floaty just using some basic shapes. I've got this big wide oval for the body of the floaty. This is what, where the person sits. To show that it is round, I just have this kind of curve in the middle. It doesn't connect to anything because this is a circle that goes around like a donut hole. And then I've got the head of the flamingo coming off the top. I do think I'm going to add just a few little lines here for that beak because there's kind of white and black on that beak. And then I want a spot for where that eye is going to be. In fact, I might even just color that in right now with pen because I don't have to worry about it with the paint. Now, some flamingo floaties have like a wing on the side. You can do things like that. We're going to keep it fairly simple today. Now I'm going to erase that pencil line so that when I paint, none of the pencil line shows through. Okay, now I can go back to what I was doing before. I can add water to almost everywhere my flamingo is. Now, the nice thing about making a shiny surface is that we just want to do a wash, a wet on wet. However, with a shiny surface, it's nice to leave some highlights of white, which means I'm going to purposefully draw a rectangle with my water and leave a spot empty of water where there is no water there. And that's gonna leave the bright white of the paper and make it look like that shiny rubber surface that it is. So I'm being very careful to kind of tilt my head and look for where I've put water. And again, I'm leaving, you'll see it better when I add color, I am leaving a spot without any water. So I'm gonna do the same thing on the back of the floaty. Actually, I'm gonna make it a little higher though, because it's not really, it doesn't need to be on the inside of the floaty. I'm doing this with quite a lot of water on my brush because I'm doing it slowly and carefully, and I don't want all the water to dry before I have a chance to add paint to it. When we do wet on wet technique, it makes the color move smoothly and not have any hard edges, and that's really important for this rubbery smooth surface. We want it to all be the same color and not be able to see brush strokes. We want it to look even. Okay, I think I put water everywhere I want it. You'll be able to see that better once I add the color. I'm using some alizarin crimson, which is a fairly pink red in the watercolor world, or in the paint world in general. And I'm waking it up with plenty of water, keeping it kind of light because this is going to be a pink. And I'm going to go ahead and add this everywhere. Now the paint is only going to go where the water is. So the paint should be avoiding those areas that I kept white. So now you're starting to see that rectangle appear. And there are hard edges along that rectangle because the water ends and it's dry paper. So again, the paint will not go where the paper is dry unless I brush it there. So by adding the paint to the water, I'm making sure that the paint only goes where I put the water. And then you'll start to see this other rectangle forming back here. Now that I can see those rectangles better, I can make them a little bit narrower even because I want them to be very slight. I don't want them to be super wide. Like this one's just, it's feeling too wide for me. So I'm gonna make it a little bit skinnier and narrower. Look how that really captures the reflection of light by being that bright white rectangle. Now there's a few other ways we can add bright white. You can use a white gouache after the fact. You could also use masking fluid to protect your paper and prevent the paint from going there. So I could have drawn those rectangles in masking fluid to begin with. I am partial to just skipping those spots with my paintbrush because that feels a little bit quicker and easier, and I'm someone who likes to just sketch and jump right in and not have to do too much planning. Now I've got my base pink everywhere. I want to add a little bit of value even while it's wet because again, I don't want to see any harsh lines. So I'm going to try to get more paint on my brush, less water, And I'm gonna drip this paint in. It's going to bleed and blend a little bit because it's gonna go where there's water. But as long as I don't have too much water on my brush, it shouldn't move super far. And that's gonna keep it looking like kind of the shadow at the base of this tube. I'm gonna do the same thing back here because this would be kind of the inside of the tube. It would also have a shadow, and let it kind of curve upward to follow the curve of that tube. Now, if some of the shadow is bleeding down because both areas are wet, I'm gonna dry my brush. I'm gonna use my dry brush like a sponge to soak up that shadow and make this top area lighter again, because I really only want the shadow in this back portion of the tube. While your paper is wet, it can be hard to control where that paint goes. So practicing adding shadow, taking it away. I'm gonna put a little bit of shadow here because there's kind of a crease on the tube. Is gonna help you feel more confident with where your paint goes. Put a little bit of shadow here. Now I have a lot of water on this flamingo head. So I'm gonna dry my brush again. And I'm gonna use my dry brush like a sponge. And then every time I lift up, I'm gonna wipe off that paint so I'm not putting it right back down. This is just taking off a little bit of the water so I have more control. I still want it to be wet. I'm not drying it with paper towel, but I'm making it less puddly so my paint doesn't spread as far when I add it. Put a little bit here for shadow. That's feeling pretty good. Because it's still wet on wet, I'm not gonna have those hard edges, but I am gonna create kind of that depth or that shadow. Maybe I'll even do actually a little bit on the outer edge. It just felt super light. There, I'm liking how that's looking. I'm going to heat this dry with my heat gun because then I won't put my hand in it on accident. And then I'm gonna paint the beak of the flamingo a nice black as well. Okay, I'm gonna wake up my black paint. I could have filled in the beak with the pen as well, but by using the paint, I can kind of, again, create a bit more value. So I'm gonna put black at the top and bottom of the beak. I'm gonna wash my brush, dry it a little bit, and I'm just going to smudge the center so that they kind of meet at a lighter gray, and it just gives tad bit more dimension to that beak. In a similar way, I'm gonna use a super, super, super watery gray to just throw a little bit of gray on that white section so it's not as stark as the paper. Now I mentioned there's other ways to add white besides doing masking fluid at the beginning. Sometimes I will use a white gel pen to add white at the end. So I did not put any white on the neck of the floaty, so I'm gonna do that now. I'm making sure I grab, oh, these are both too small. I like to use a 10 white gel pen. So here I have my 10. It just seems to show up better than the smaller numbers. And with my 10 on dry paint, I can go and I can draw, I'll just do a few little dots. I'm gonna add some more here, a few more highlight lines. So again, this is just another way to further that illusion of a shiny light. It especially worked really well on the shoulder there, or on the neck, I suppose. I could even do a little bit on that beak to again show that it's shiny plastic. You can also use it to kind of cover up or erase your paint if it's not smudging off. I think that paint I could just smudge off if I really wanted to, but I'm not feeling super particular. Maybe I'll actually put a little white dot in the eye because it ended up turning a little pink. And there I go. I have a pink floaty flamingo. I used the wet and wet technique to make it look shiny and rubbery, and it was a super fun, easy, quick painting. So join me for another one as we continue to paint summertime.